All right, sports fans, I want to talk about dealing with inherently high resonant tracks. And what I mean by that is some tracks just sound resonant. And what I mean by that is they have very high Q, narrow, peaky things, and that's the nature of their sound. And you'll find this a lot more in the synth world, I think, than anywhere. There's something about synths that, well, even their whole resonance knob, on the filter, that's a common trick to use. And I find that I just don't hear that on final, I don't hear it sounded as peaky on final recordings. So let's take a look, and I got an example of one we had done on a little production here. Let's see. You'll hear it come in. It's right here, this little reddish, black, pink, whatever that color is. Okay, and I was, shut up, delay. I do this every time. I was really hoping to kind of keep that loud. In the mix, I like the idea of it kind of jumping out. And so I was kind of looking at my options here, and I've got an instance of Sonoformer, which is a multi-band, 31-band multi-band compressor, essentially. And it's a little more complicated than that, but the idea here is we're going to try to tame some of those frequencies. But before we do any of that, let's just turn all this stuff off. I got a compressor, and I got the Sonoformer, and then this band. So let's take a look at what it's doing before we even touch it. I got it. Figured it out on the fly, on the job training here. Okay, as you can see, we've got very, very peaky little waves here, and there's not a whole lot of stuff in between. And generally speaking, that's an unpleasing tone. That's something we don't normally want much of, because what's going to happen is in any stereo that happens to have a little peak there at whatever that is, 750 hertz, give or take, or at 1.5K, which is a painful frequency anyway, and also not so much, but also 2.3K. We're playing with fire here. Any stereo that has any peaks there is going to hurt, and I noticed this a whole lot on my home stereo when I'm doing bashless recording or judging any of the contest mixes. It's very for something about my computer speakers, which I like the sound of. I'm quite fond of them, actually, and I do all my fun listening on them. And they're not amazing, but they're good for me. And anyway, I can live with it, so I would imagine most people can. I hear these peaky things all the time, and it doesn't seem like too many other people notice. But I don't hear that on any pro level, great sounding stuff. So that tells me this is something the big boys are catching that maybe not everybody else is in home recording land, at least not on our side. Anyway, so we have a problem, and these will hurt somewhere if they're not hurting already. They don't sound pleasing here on my monitor or in my headphones I'm using right now. I don't like it. And the thing is, this is part of the sound, though. And so we kind of run into a paradox, a little bit of problem. We could go in and notch these two peaks, but imagine if you could just neutralize all these entirely. Well, what would be left? And the answer is not a whole lot. But let's just for fun, let's go ahead and put a dip down at, I'll start with this one. I got a feeling it's more painful, 1.5K. And we'll see if we get anywhere by doing this kind of surgery business. Because it could be just there's a painful frequency that we need to address, but it could be that this is just the nature of the sound and we really can't do much with it. That was weird. Okay, we got 1.5K. I'm going to go all the way up to 16 on the Q department, so it's a very, very thin little sliver. And let's just go ahead and cut out 7 decibels. Looks good. Okay, before with no EQ. All right, and after with EQ. I'm not sure I heard a difference at all. Let's see what span looks like with it. And it does sound like we're clipping, by the way. It's hitting the tube-bus a little bit hard or something, but that's not super critical at this point. I guess I can turn it down just a bit. Okay, let's see. So it looks like just to finding what was most likely the most painful frequency and doing something to that did very little. Now let's find the higher frequency notch and see if that does anything. All right, so I'm going to go up to 2.3K and see if that helps us. I'm skeptical of this as well. So what we're finding here is no matter what we notch out, I'm not hearing any real significant difference. And that's unfortunate. So what I did do was I tossed on Soniformer, and that's usually really awesome at smoothing out peaks. In fact, I think it's the best catcher of peakiness they make, period. And maybe there's some hardware devices we could overload on purpose that would kind of catch this peakiness. But other than that, and I'm not even sure what those would be, but other than that, in plug-in land, this is where it's at. I love this thing. So let's see what it does with it on. And see, it's doing its best, and it is catching some of those peaks, but it's still got that inherently just awfulness to it. And again, we could argue, why do we use this sound? And that's where it does get a little bit tricky. But we liked it at the time. We weren't thinking, we were just making music, and here we go. And it cut through, which is a clue, by the way. But in the end, we don't love it. Now, I put this, or at least I don't love it right now. It's going to piss off some stereos. All right, lastly, I've got 1176. Let's see if that tames it at all. And that did do something good. That may have just reduced the volume so the 2-bus isn't working quite so hard, because it's still irritating the 2-bus there. And I probably should have dealt with that before the video, but I think we're okay. All right, and so really where we're at with this is multiband compression didn't work, EQ didn't work, and regular compression didn't do a whole lot except for turn the volume down. So let's go back to the context of the mix here. And I want to we'll do 2-bar loop here, and maybe that'll get us a little closer. What I ultimately figured out, and this does translate just fine, is that because this thing cuts, this is a cutting machine. And if we went back to span and saw that, I don't know if I have it held out anymore, but we look at those frequency things, those little sharp peaks are going to just blast through any stereo. They're going to cut like crazy. And so what does that mean? It means we can just turn them down. And that was something that I kind of just had to rethink my process in this mix here. Instead of having these kind of hit you upside the head, yanking them down, I don't know what I did. I used 6 decibels, 10 decibels, something really aggressive in terms of quantity. I went crazy pulling it down, and it still cut through just fine. So let's start looking at that in context and start kind of loud. And right there, obviously, we can hear it. But what's deceptive about these high resonance type of sounds is it seems like it just kind of cut through nicely. Well, no, it's way too loud. And it's something about the way we hear really makes that tricky. So let's pull it down 3 decibels and see what that does. Almost unnoticeable in terms of being able to hear it. It was a hair less painful and a hair less harsh, but for being 3 decibels lower in a kind of dense mix, that should have been a lot more obvious. But because we're dealing with high Q sources, it doesn't quite work that way. Let's go another 3. We'll go down to minus 22. And we're 6 decibels down, and we're still in no danger of losing it. And so I guess that's the ultimate point of this. When you're dealing with high resonant tracks that you really can't save, but that's really what the artist wanted. The real solution is to rethink your levels on a scale that maybe you wouldn't with other tracks. So, and you're going to have to just pull them way down. So now we're at minus 28, which is over 10 decibels softer than what I had originally. Isn't that crazy? It's still there. It's almost making me think I'm goofing up. So let me just mute it to make sure I'm using the right track. And I am. And so that just shows you how crazy these really high resonant tracks work. And so let's go down another 10. Let's see what that does. So I'm down 20 decibels, minus 38, which is a really low signal anyway. And it's still there just fine. So rethink your levels on these highly resonant tracks whenever they really start to be a problem. And hopefully you have a system that you can check on that will illustrate these for you. Hopefully your monitors tell you. But if they don't, find something that will. All right, guys. Thanks. Bye.